into these Armed American Radio studios. Okay, we continue with the strongest pro-gun, pro-rights, pro-Second Amendment, pro-freedom lineup on radio today, or this week, that you will hear in one spot. I can promise you that. Joining me now, one of my favorite guests of all times, and you'll soon find out why. Mr. Larry Pratt is the Executive Director of the Gun Owners of America, and a man who, let's just say, tells it like it is, and when he says no compromise, he means it. Larry Pratt, welcome to the show, my friend. Always fun to have you here.
Mark, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate being with you.
Well, and you've had a busy day. I know you were on with our great friend Tom Gresham over at Gun Talk earlier today, too, weren't you?
I guess we had recorded that earlier, but if it aired today, you betcha.
Okay, good. It did. The magic of technology. Well, we've got you live, so let's go right at it. Larry, I have had, you are one of what is no doubt the most stellar lineup on radio talking about this subject. And tonight you cap off for us a program that started with Alan Gottlieb, continued with John Lott, moved into Alan Corwin, and now comes to you. And I want to ask you a couple of the same questions that I asked each of these individuals, and I'm looking forward to getting your answer. I want to know what the first thing that went through Larry Pratt's mind when you heard the news and confirmed the news, maybe even before you confirmed the news. Mr. Corwin was quite clear on that there had been an attack on our military in Chattanooga, less than 80 miles from these Crossbreed Holster studios. What was the first thing that went through your mind?
The first thing was anger, because this was so preventable, and folks like us have been talking about this, and we've been trying to get members of Congress to act on this kind of problem. So far, without a great deal of success. There's something in our psyche that seems to be stuck on stupid when it comes to gun-free zones, that somehow, and I've seen people actually say this, heard people say this, well, I just feel safer thinking that there's not going to be somebody else in the room with a gun. And, of course, if God forbid somebody comes in not benignly with a gun, attempting to commit mass murder, then I think the last few seconds of emotion are anything but feeling safe.
Well said, because what that does is it embodies everything phony about a gun-free zone, doesn't it?
Oh, my, it is such a lie.
It's the big lie.
Deception. A very big lie. And people have been dying because of this deception. The numbers, and Dr. Lott may have tossed it out, but since 1950, all but 2 of our mass murders have been in these horrible gun-free zones.
And you know, Larry, he points out, and as you well know, we know this from many of the killers' own writings, musings, and their own words that we find after the fact, because yet again, as human beings, we are powerless to detect, as A.W.R. Hawkins says on my daily show, latent criminal activity. So the absurdity of a gun-free zone, when we know a criminal knows we are gun-free and they aren't, is a murder zone.
Yeah, the Aurora dirtbag had reportedly gone past maybe a half a dozen theaters on foot before he got to one farther away that had that absolutely horrid sign, "No guns."
Yeah, he wrote about it. He wrote about it as well, as you know. Because our time is so short, let me move quickly with you. I think, Larry, and I want you to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I believe we may be at a watershed moment now with the gun-free zone and finally being at that, I think we're at first base of being able to eradicate these death zones, these murder zones, these killing zones, these slaughter zones. So my question to you is, we apparently have, question 1, part A for you. Do you think, like I do, that the American people are now going to put their weight towards ending these gun-free zones because the absurdity of it is so apparent? That's the first part. Do you believe that?
You know, the fact that 4 Marines and now a cop, I think it was the 5th person that succumbed, but 5 people, all of whom would have been perfectly capable of defending themselves. And perhaps the first one could have been taken by surprise, but the rest would have almost certainly been able to act. These were combat veterans.
Right.
I do think this wasn't their first rodeo, and yet we tied their hands. We allowed our elected officials to continue this kind of policy. So, frankly, this is not easy to say, but I think we all share a certain amount of responsibility. We're not the ones that pulled the trigger, so I'm not trying to say that, but we're complicit to the extent that we have not these elected officials that they better stop setting it up for people to get killed.
No, you're right. And what I want to know is, do you think that the tide might be turning? I mean, I'm seeing some rumblings from all sides now that at the very least we have to end gun-free zones at the federal and the military installations, right?
I think maybe you're right. I have that sense. It's not anything that's scientific. We haven't got a survey of members of Congress. But there's something about the horror of 4 young, battle-hardened Marines, plus another person now, just being mowed down because Dianne Feinstein doesn't like them to have guns.
Okay, so let me ask that second part of that question. Mr. Gottlieb said earlier on the show that he does not believe in under any circumstance will gun hater in chief Barack Obama ever sign an executive order rescinding one of his beloved gun-free zones, even though it's getting our military now killed on American soil. Nor does he believe, if Congress overwhelmingly passes a bill and puts it on his desk, that he will sign it. He believes he will veto it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's true. The president hates the military, and I'll say it. I don't think he minds them getting killed. I think he believes they have it coming to him, just like America has it coming to it, because America has been, in his mind, so evil. But there is a way to tie the president's hands. The problem is that the people that would have to tie the knot have very limp wrists. They're called Republicans. And
right.
What they would have to do is say, in the appropriate place in the budget, none of these funds may be used to enforce gun-free zone laws.
In a defense appropriations bill, John Lott mentioned that as well, too. And yet again, John Lott did not feel that Obama would sign that either.
Well, see, okay, I don't either. I don't think he would sign it, but I do see ultimately him feeling forced to sign. He felt that way and did sign a measure that said none of these funds may be used to prohibit firearms in national parks.
Right, near the beginning of his first term, that's right.
He signed off on that because he wanted that budget more than he wanted to see people killed in national parks. But I think something like this you could put onto a Homeland Security measure or whatever is a convenient appropriations target. And certainly if it's Homeland Security, I don't care if the president doesn't sign it and the whole bloody unconstitutional department has to shut down. That's not a problem in my mind at all. And it's been a false security that they were any good at protecting the country. I just don't buy that being unconstitutional is a good way to go.
You're hearing Larry Pratt, the executive director and the founder of the Gun Owners of America. Now you know why it is America's no-compromise gun lobby. When we come back from the break, I've got a number of questions.
From the Crossbreed Holster Studios, here is Mark Walters.
Back in the Crossbreed Holster Studios, I'm talking with Mr. Larry Pratt. Larry is the No Compromise founder and executive director of the Gun Owners of America. Now you know why. Larry, question for you. I asked it as we went into the break. I'll ask it now that we're back. Is America at war?
If anybody can say that we're not at war, I don't know what they think is happening. Now, we're not at war with a country the way we were with a government, a rogue government, in the last century. But we are at war with one of the most vicious religions that's ever been inflicted upon the face of the earth. Islam has as its core belief that if you don't agree with Islam, you're to be killed or to be subjected to a crippling tax or converted. Those are your three options. I don't accept any of those three. That's why I am an armed American. And I think that's increasingly coming across to people. I think that's one of the main reasons why, in addition to Ferguson and Baltimore, we are seeing an uptick in women buying guns, in people of all kinds buying guns, and it's just got to be so distressing for the gun control weenies. But violent crime is going down, too. At the same time,
right.
More and more of us per capita own guns.
And the lies from the gun-hating left continue. I wish we had more time with you. I want to stay on the – boy, I could go in just a million different directions with you, Larry, right now. I wish I could. Let me ask you this. Will you be at the Gun Rights Policy Conference in September in Phoenix?
I'm planning to, yes, sir.
Good. I'm looking forward to talking with you there. I can't wait. I will be there speaking as well. Okay. Well, I have to ask this then, because I knew how you were going to answer that question. Why won't the occupant of the People's House, the President of the United States of America, who took an oath, whose number one responsibility is to defend and protect America and her citizens, why won't this man admit what 99% of the entire world, not just America, but the world knows? Why won't he admit it?
Well, Mr. Obama has told us that he thinks this country needs to be fundamentally transformed. That means there was something wrong with this country. Because of his Marxist upbringing, he was trained to hate America. And he's trying to do what he can, especially in his last 2 years, with no more elections that he faces. And frankly, his fellow Democrats are not going to face another election with him as a credible factor in that election. He's going to be, a Hillary Clinton or a Governor O'Malley or some, pick a Democrat and put him in. That's going to shift to that new face, same old views but new face. Right. And so I think in this last 2 years we're seeing a doubling down by this president, doing anything he thinks he can possibly get away with. And frankly, from what he's been able to ascertain the first 6 years, he can get away with just about anything. The Republicans are not willing to confront him, to use the power of the purse that the Constitution has given to them, and to say, Mr. Obama, we're turning off your money for this, that, and the other thing. And he'll come back, of course, and say, well, then I'm just going to shut down the parts of the government that you like the most, like the Veterans Administration, which he hates. He hates veterans, and he doesn't mind it. There's this horrendous waiting list for these folks to get medical attention. And so he's playing a game that the Republicans aren't willing to call him out on. And that's why we face so many problems. That's why he gets away with so much, because there's really not a loyal opposition.
Yeah, that's very frightening, and unfortunately, it's true. Unfortunately, we have example after example of where that has been the case, that making the next year and a half incredibly dangerous. So, having said that, let me move to the next one. Your thoughts on the latest LA Times piece about Obama using executive action to ban guns from nearly 5 million Social Security recipients. I know you've got an opinion on this one.
It is similar to what he tries to do with Obamacare by using psychiatric diagnosis as the predicate for denying, putting you in a database so that when you go to get a concealed carry permit, you're denied. When you go to buy a firearm at a store and go through the background check, you're denied. And so I can see him, what he's done is essentially proposed, I don't think it's hit quite yet, but, you want to get Social Security benefits? Well, then make sure that your home is gun-free, because otherwise the only way you're going to get to be able to keep your guns is to relinquish your claims to Social Security. In other words, you'll have to buy your right to keep and bear arms at the price of whatever Social Security you're owed. How's that for extortion? Ain't that the Chicago way?
Well, that is the Chicago way. That's the Chicago corrupt way. That's the way business has been done in Chicago since there's been a Chicago. It's why so many Chicago politicians are sitting in a prison cell right now. And unfortunately, well, let me just put it this way. I don't know how the latest ban is going to turn out. I can only hope. I said in the previous segments, Larry, that I was cautiously optimistic about the American people standing up as a whole in unison and finally eradicating gun-free zones. Look, I'll take a start at the military level, because once that happens, they'll be forced to admit gun-free zones on down the line are a farce and a joke. So I'll take that start. But when it comes to this latest quote-unquote potential executive action, I'm hopeful that Americans will rise up again. However, I'm not confident, because the media will downplay this. It will happen, as Mr. Gottlieb said, behind the scenes and under the radar, and most people won't be aware of it until it slaps them in the face.
Well, it's very likely to be the scenario that each person that's being zapped will think that he's alone. And unless he's conversant with the Internet and is able to use it effectively to find out that, there's a massive campaign underway by this administration to abuse those powers in that way, then people who are feeling isolated are much more likely to simply give in. And, okay, I'll give you my gun because I really need that Social Security.
So again, it's fear. It's fear. It's using fear. And again, it is extortion. That is the definition of extortion. Larry Pratt, thank you for being here and talking with us today about this incredibly important topic. Gunowners.org. Gunowners.org. Mr. Pratt, you're doing exceptional work over there. We appreciate everything you've done and are continuing to do on behalf of all of us who fight for the right to keep and bear arms. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Gunowners.org. Go join these groups. You've heard an
appreciate what you're doing with your show, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. We appreciate it. You've heard an epic discussion with 4 incredible guests here on the Armed American Radio Network, 4 of the most powerful people in the pro-freedom movement. I hope you had as much fun listening to them as I had